So Josh, give us kind of a snapshot of you growing up, mom, dad, family life, brothers, sisters, kind of where you grew up and how you got to Hastings.
Yeah, it's a long question, but I have two brothers and two sisters. My older sister and me are biological. The rest of us are half. Um, me and my older sister's mom died when we were two, when I was two. My sister was five, in a motorcycle accident that my dad was driving the motorcycle on. It was pretty bad deal. And so my dad was raising us just me by himself, just me and my older sister. We moved around quite a bit because of that, because we were financially unstable, and ended up in Faribault, Minnesota, where my grandma lives, and I had to stay with her for a while too. And then my dad found married another lady from down there, had a child, and so I have a half brother from Faribault. That marriage did not work out, and then we moved around quite a bit again after that, and then we ended up all over the place: Detroit, Michigan, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then my dad remarried again for a third time, to my current mom, or stepmom, Lisa, who was a great lady. And we moved to Egan at that time, and found a hotel or apartment building there. We're still not doing real well financially. My dad worked really hard, but just tough to make ends meet with five kids. Or actually, at that time, I think we ended up having another sister then, so four kids at the time, and just not a steady income, and bounced from job to job. He did pretty much everything to try to make ends meet. And my dad was always still really involved in wrestling, and he got me started in preschool down in Faribault. And I still remember the coach, Ed Kane. He still coaches like at the junior national level, so it's awesome. And but great guy, and I still remember him. And then and I did wrestling this whole time. My dad coached some teams as well. Like in Egan, he had a van, so he'd pick up kids from the neighborhood. We'd go to some low income housing areas up in St. Paul, and he coached his own team on at the Humboldt area, or West Side, West End, I think they called it. And so it was always a part of my life, and even some of those kids on those teams still remember my dad, and I remember them from that, and still had some of those connections. We ended up finding a low income house in Hastings, just over by Lions Park, going into fifth grade, so right after summer after fourth grade. And it was a huge change of pace from Egan and the wealth there to Hastings, and it helped. I really think it helped me out, because I over there I was really an outlier because of our economic status. But in Hastings, I fit right in, and it was a really good fit for us. So I think God had a purpose for us and our family, finding that low income house here in town, and we were able to move here. And right away, I remember the first time I got to town, I met Coach Veit at a practice, and he grabbed me by my chubby little face and said, "You're going to do great things for Hastings wrestling." And I'll never forget that. And he didn't even barely know me, And I mean, I was a pretty good wrestler at that time too. But like, how the heck did he know who I was or anything, And pretty neat experience. But he sucked me in right from that first time, and never looked back, I guess. But I think that pretty much answers most of your questions. I miss anything in there?
No, yeah, that's good. And maybe this is kind of fast forwarding, but I know you said your dad kind of picked up a lot of the kids from the neighborhood for those practices, but kind of talk about maybe some of the who those guys were and kind of their wrestling history too, and where wrestling led them.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite ones is, and I'm still in close contact with this guy. His name's Jamel Tidwell. He's helped out with Apple Valley Wrestling. He ended up going to, he's first in his family as well to go to college. Went to Augsburg, did super well at Augsburg. They won some national titles there. And he was my neighbor in Egan. So, and my dad would say, "Hey, you want to join wrestling?" And he's like, "I don't know what that is, but sure." Me and him were buddies, and his older brother I was super close with. So then we started driving him to practice a couple times a week, and he just loved it and ended up being an absolute stud. And like I said, he helps out at Egan, or sorry, at Apple Valley, and now he's like a dean of students, I think, or something along those lines over at Apple Valley. But me and him had different paths, but a lot of it was interesting that wrestling really got us to all those doors opening in our lives. And both of us were first in our families to go to college, and both grew up poor and had different adversity thrown at us, and that we'd had to overcome. And but yeah, he's a great person, and we've actually had him. I've had him come over to Hastings and meet some of our kids and help mentor some of our younger wrestlers as well. And he's just a great person, great person to lean on.
That's awesome. So then maybe starting off in maybe kindergarten, first grade, maybe somewhere around then, go through your kind of sports you played growing up. Maybe stop around sixth grade, somewhere around sixth grade with your sports journey.
Gotcha. Well, my dad actually was coaching a tackle football league in Parterhorn Park in Minneapolis. He was coaching the fifth graders, and I was on there was a third grade team. I wasn't in third grade yet, but my dad lied on the form, so I got to play tackle football when I was in second grade. So I played tackle football out there for second and for 2 years before moving to. And actually, I wrestled for the Powder Park Club too, and they've had a lot of great wrestlers who come through there. Marcus Sylvester being one of them. So I met him at a young age as well, and he ended up going on to be a national champ and stuff for Augsburg, and he's now the head coach at Shakopee. So I ran into him as a youth, and we were good buddies back then. But anyway, that's where we started there, and I played some baseball too at that time. Ran track. There was a couple state tournaments in track my dad got me involved in, and I did decent in track as well. And then we moved to Egan, and they started a football program up there, tackle football in fourth grade. So I already had 2 years of tackle football. Show up at Egan, they just started a program, their tackle football program, and I played with Tom Fritzy, a teacher and coach at Hastings' brother, back then too. So another little connection from sports later in life. And I think he's a head coach at East Ridge High School now, something like that, I believe, for football. But we played on the same fourth grade tackle football team, and then moved to Hastings in fifth grade, and they started Little Raiders that year too. And that's where I met just a ton of friends and lifelong friends actually through that. So fourth or fifth grade, Little Raiders started up, and I was able to play then, and then the rest of the way through. So
That's awesome. So then starting in seventh grade and middle school, kind of walk us through your sports journey then. What kind of sports you played? Did you just kind of start specializing in one specific sport or kind of dabble in a lot of different things? And then maybe walk through, because I know you started pretty early for wrestling on the varsity. So maybe kind of walk through what years you started on maybe JV, or you were still playing sports through the middle school level, varsity level sports too. And
yeah,
in about seventh grade.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to rewind real quick back to Little Raiders because it was such a good experience for me. I remember my dad had been coaching football for a long time at about that age level. See, when we got here, he said, "Hey, this team, Josh, your athletes in these grades. It's something special. I think you guys are going to be good growing up." And fast forward, obviously, he knew what he was talking about. But just the amount of athletes that we had in house here in town at that era, out of control. I mean, there's dozens of Division I athletes just in those 2 grades. I mean, several. I mean, probably more than a dozen. So it's pretty cool that, all the way through we were competitive, and I remember I started lifting weights like 6th grade at the middle school, or at the high school. So and I'd start going in the mornings, and Coach Veit would open it up for me. And so I'd go in there and get a workout. Then I'd walk to the middle school, and then some of my buddies from the football team are like, "Hey, McLay, can we hop in with you?" So before you know, we had 10 guys lifting in the morning on our own at the high school, and then we'd walk as a group. Stop at Emily's and grab a donut, of course, but we'd stop and we'd go as a group. We'd lift weights, and then we'd walk to the middle school and go to school. And that was I think that started in like 7th grade, and that was just my football buddies, but we all had the same goals, and it was really neat. We just kind of fed off of each other, and there's some really good athletes that came out of that group. But if you want to get into talking about multi-sport, all these kids are multi-sport at that era. Every one of my friends played 3 sports all the way through, or most of the way through. But yeah, so middle school, I played football for the middle school team here. We lost, I think, 1 game between the lightweights and heavyweights because it was broken up like that in 6th and 7th, or 7th and 8th grade, because we had Little Raiders. So between 7th and 8th grade, we lost 1 game. It was a close game, but we blew out most teams, and it was awesome. And we were just super competitive. But yeah, I ran track with the middle school too, and our track team was awesome. And obviously wrestled. 6th grade, I wrestled for the middle school. Then I got brought up as a 7th grader on the varsity team, and I wrestled at 126. I think the weight class was back then, as a 7th grader. And most kids that are brought up wrestle at 103 was the weight back then. So I took my lumps that year wrestling those older kids. I went like 7 and 11. But our wrestling room was just so tough. Man, it was you had to survive in that room, is what it was. And this the level of competition, and then how many all-state, all-American type level kids were in that room under Coach Veit. It was just amazing competition every single day. Going in there was a grind. And then 8th grade came back. I had much better year. I think I bumped up to 140 or something like that by that year. And almost made it to state individually. I should have. I kind of choked in the section true second match. I was beating this kid, and he picked me up and slammed me late in the match. And now looking back, I was probably concussed, but back then I think we just said I got my bell rung. But I just remember thinking I didn't feel right after that, and I shouldn't have lost to that kid. I lost like in the last seconds, and I just felt like I was numb. So that wasn't a great experience, but luckily our team was so good. 2 weeks later, we qualified for state, and for the first time in like forever. So I think my rewind back to my 7th grade year, we beat Simile in the conference for the first time in 17 years. And I got to wrestle in that match, and I beat a kid that was that actually placed at the Christmas tournament and I was ranked in states. I wrestled phenomenal. And it was awesome for our team to win. I remember that experience, the first conference banner that we hung in our room in forever. Then moving into my 8th grade year, I knew we had a special team that year too, and that was '96. We go on to win the state title that year. That's the year I did not qualify as individual, but I went with the team, obviously, and I wrestled all 3 matches. All 3 matches were against kids that were state entrants from those other squads, and 2 of them placed at my weight at state, and I beat all 3 of them. So I wrestled really well. But I got that confidence. So just from like every single day in that room, every kid in that room was so tough that we just fed off each other. So when I stepped in the mat, I knew I was ready to go, even though I was young. Sometimes young kids just don't really know how big the moment is. And I think that was a part of it too. I was also just happy I got my chance to compete at state, and the team hadn't been there in forever. So it was awesome. And I think we ended up being like ranked 7th in the country and won the state title. We beat Apple Valley in the state finals that year. Unforgettable experience, and still like one of my best memories growing up. So that was pretty special.
So that was 8th grade, and then walk us through 9 through 12. Once again, sports you played, years you started on varsity, and then kind of accomplishments as well.
So 9th grade year, I was still a 3-sport athlete going through that year. I was the last year I ran track. I lettered in track in the pole vault, which is surprising because I don't like heights. Actually, one of my coach then I coach with now in football, Todd Levos, and so he still remembers some of the stories of me pole vault, and he just couldn't believe it. And then I think I lettered in some of the sprinting events too. But it was just a way to train and hang out and keep exercising and hang out with my friends that I was close to. So I got a little more involved in Greco and freestyle, a lot more, and I just didn't have much time moving forward. And so I ended up not running track 10th, 11th, and 12th because of that. Because I was traveling so much and competing at a higher level with freestyle and Greco in the spring. So this really wasn't conducive. But that year in football, we went undefeated again in football 9th grade year, 10th grade year, 11th grade year, lost 1 game. My senior year, like you alluded to earlier, we lost in the state finals as well. But so I played football with all the same guys going through, great guys. And then my 9th grade year, I made it to state and individually, and our team made it and placed pretty high that year too. Something tough happened to me. I had a little adversity was thrown my way. We back then there were set times for the sessions, and there was a set time for weigh-ins. So I wrestled individuals in the morning, and I won my I think 2 matches, and so I'm in the semifinals of the individual bracket, guaranteed to place, guaranteed all state. But then we wrestled Apple Valley that night in a match that we should have, could have won. Apple Valley handed it to us, and we just didn't. We weren't ready. And didn't get it done that year, which was sad. But so I'm watching the match, and I'm done, and I should have probably been out running and checking my weight, but everybody's so engaged in our teammates in the moment, and all the sessions ran a little bit late that day, and so by the time the duel got done, the coach got me on the scale right afterwards. I had 40 minutes, and I was 4 pounds over. So I lost in 40 minutes. I lost 3 pounds. I ran as hard as I could for that amount of time, but my teammates were with me and the coaches were, sad, but they're supporting me, and I didn't make weight. And it sucks now because the day after that, they changed the rule to 90 minutes after the last match. I should have had 90 minutes because I just didn't have enough time. And even nowadays they do them in the mornings, that. So they've changed the setup since then. But that day literally from 96 to last year, they were doing 90-minute weigh-ins because of me not making weight as a freshman, which is just a huge bummer. It felt like just a horrible setback, and but I learned from it and got better from it too, and I kind of used that as motivation going into that summer for Cadet Nationals. And for people that don't know, Cadet Nationals is an unbelievably big tournament, and there's kids from all over the country that qualify. Brackets are like 100 people in a bracket, and it's a huge thing up in Fargo. It's one of the biggest wrestling tournaments in the world. So that year I went up there. The year before, I got beat out right in the blood round, which was a bummer, to just a stud from that had wrestled for Oklahoma. And he's just a tough kid. I lost in the blood round to him. And the next year, that was in freestyle. The next year, I qualified for freestyle and Greco, so I go up there and wrestle Greco first, which is my love. I love Greco probably more than anything with wrestling, and probably found the most success in it. So that year, we go up there and I win Greco-Roman at nationals, and then I backed it up the next tournament the same week and win like 14 matches and win freestyle nationals as a cadet. So that was a pretty big deal. The cool thing about it was Isaiah Larson from Hastings did the same thing as a junior, or actually in Greco he won. So I had guys around me from Hastings that were winning national titles at the highest level, not in the youth level, which is cool, but at Fargo is just another. I mean, as you know, and people that wrestling know, that's the real deal when it's up there. So it was pretty cool. But I think that adversity that I fought through that freshman year, getting disqualified from the state tournament because I didn't make weight, was a huge setback. And instead of just being sad about it, I just propelled that into the freestyle Greco season.
That's awesome. And then starting in 10th grade, then maybe talk about, you kind of already talked about football, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, and then wrestling, just so people know kind of your accomplishments with high school wrestling in those 3 years.
Yeah. So, there was I would have had a kid in the finals, Luke Becker, who ended up being an NCAA champ and a teammate of mine at the Gophers. He was a kid I was supposed to have in the finals my 10th grade or my freshman year. My 10th grade year, he was at a weight class that I was wrestling at, and I didn't believe I could beat him at that time. He's just an absolute stud. And so the coaches sat me down and said, "Hey, where's your best chance of being a state champ this year?" And that was my goal. They knew it was. And they knew Luke Becker was at 152. And I was been wrestling 152 the whole season. And I was cutting hard to really get there too. And they're like, do you think you can beat him? And I'm like, yeah, I think I can give him a really good match. And they're like, well, what if you cut down to 45? Who can't you beat there? And I'm like, I think I can beat everybody at 145. I don't think there's one person I can't beat. And they're like, why don't you just cut down, sacrifice, and make it happen? And I'm like, dang, that makes a lot of sense. And but I'm telling you that it took a drain on me cutting that much weight to get down to 145. I mean, that's the weight I missed at state the year before. So I didn't make weight at state the year before at that weight class. And now they're asking me to cut back down to that same weight class again. And but the state title was on the line, and I could see that, and the coaches helped talk me through it. My dad was really supportive and believed in me, and knew I could do it. And so I started believing too, and I dieted super well. I was eating, portioning out every single thing I put in my body, and I knew how I was able to compete with it, and I made it happen. And so winning the state title as a 10th grader was pretty a great moment. And it didn't happen overnight. There was a lot of work to put into it, and it was awesome, but those same years too, like that same year at state. So I beat the kid from Owatonna in the state finals handily. And so we're wrestling Owatonna in the state championship for team. So coach looks at me and he goes, "Hey, you have to win the flip." And for people that are unaware, the coin toss at the beginning of a wrestling match determines what wrestler you present at what weights. And coach knew that he had to get me on that same kid I had in the state championship match for us to win the duel. He knew it was going to come down to that. So of course I lose the flip. Dang it. So I lose the flip, and they were able to put out a different wrestler against me, and they bumped up that kid, the Owatonna kid, to beat another one of our studs at the weight class above. So we lost those guys. It came down to heavyweight. We still had a chance, but Coach Veit knew that was going to come down to that. And this was a bummer. So it's a really high moment a couple hours before, and it was pretty low moment taking second, knowing that we were good enough to be state champions again that year. So it's kind of a bummer that it happened that way, but that's life. So
awesome. And then you follow it up 11th and 12th grade with individual state championship again, your 11th and 12th grade year, and then talk about team as well, maybe both those years.
Yeah, those teams are super tough too. I remember one of those teams. I think it was my senior year. We were ranked like 7th in state, and we were in the semifinals against Owatonna, and they were ranked in the country that year. They looked past us, didn't even think we were on the map. They were getting ready for Apple Valley in the finals, and we we found a way to beat those guys. And so it was awesome. We had no business beating them. And that was just a awesome experience too, beating Owatonna when literally they were ranked in the country that we had nobody in the state that we had a chance of beating those guys, and we found a way to pull it off. So that was awesome. Transferring over to football, since obviously you want to talk about that too. That was probably one of my toughest losses in football. Is we beat in an epic game in '98. We beat Woodbury in the conference championship game. People still talk about it. It was amazing football game. And again, on both squads, there was a million Division I athletes on the field. It was crazy. And we beat them in a game that we should have beat them in the conference championship. Then they come to Hastings and play us in the section finals, and we were winning, and we were in the driver's seat, and things just didn't. A couple things just didn't go our way. I was a part of one of those situations, but it's obviously and that weighs on me, and it still does. But it just didn't work out, and it sucks because Woodbury went on to the state tournament and rolled everybody else. It wasn't even close. Like it was, so we were shoulda, woulda, coulda again been state champs in football that year. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that was one of the best teams we've ever put together in Hastings. Talk about athletes on that team. Danny Welch was our running back, one of the best running backs you could imagine in high school. Kid was a monster. Goes and plays Division I hockey at the Gophers, and Ben Utek was a wide receiver for us. Goes on to play for the Gophers and wins the Super Bowl. I mean, he was on that team. I mean, the list goes on. Dustin Vogelsang played quarterback. He's now a coach over at East Ridge for hockey. But this Adam Gerlach, a 3-sport all-state athlete, and the list. I can just keep going. There's a million kids. So, but that team was just unbelievable. But just didn't fall our way that day, And I don't know why, but that's how sports is. That was a pretty tough loss. Move forward the next year, one of our best football wins in my career was beating Eden Prairie in the semifinals of state. And that year we were undefeated. And so we're undefeated going into the state championship game, beat Eden Prairie, who's obviously a big dog all the time. And this team was phenomenal too. This team was, again, just filled with studs. And we were just talented everywhere. And our kids put in the time. All these kids that I'm talking about are all 3-sport athletes that train year round together. And it was just amazing. It was so much fun. We competed everywhere. We could have been in the back of somebody's house playing flag football or tackle football. And the competition level was crazy. Basketball and everything. Didn't matter the sport. Our group of friends were just so tight. Everybody was athletic, and we would just compete all the time. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of great memories. And then losing in my senior year in 1999, the state finals against Joe Mauer. He was one of the best quarterbacks ever. And he just picked us apart, and we had a great defense. We were missing 2 of our best defensive linemen for that game. And I'd like to think we could beat them with those guys, but again, you never know. And Joe Mauer was definitely on cue that game. I really believe he could have been a probably at least a Division I quarterback for sure. He had offers everywhere, but he probably could have been a professional quarterback as well as a catcher. So, so it was sad that we lost, but it was a great experience being with those guys and being in the state championship game. That was pretty cool.
I mean, obviously you weren't on the team then year after you graduated, but they won the state championship that year. So a lot of those team guys that you played with, obviously were juniors at that time or sophomores, maybe too. I mean, you guys are helping build that next generation, and then those guys go on win the tournament the next year. So that's pretty cool that you're kind of part of that, not with those guys, but part of that as well, so that's pretty
absolutely
neat. Moving on here. If you had to pick, I know you probably just named a ton of them, and you said they were kind of some of your favorite moments too, but if you had to pick maybe one of your favorite moments from football and one of your favorite moments from wrestling, what would they be?
Without question, for wrestling, it's winning the state title as a team in '96, beating Apple Valley, who is the gold standard or was for wrestling in our state. Just recently, obviously, that they've dropped off quite a bit, but they were the gold standard for decades. And beating them in the state championship when they were loaded, and so were we. It was awesome. It was the best memory for wrestling in high school, for sure. And I tell you, it's tough though too. Like my senior year, my goal was to be a junior double national champ too for Greco and freestyle, and I accomplished that. And that was a pretty awesome moment too. And not a lot of people get that opportunity. And so that was awesome. But I tell you, just being a part of that team and that team aspect of it, that trumps it for sure because of that. It's just, you can't replicate that. Um, and I think I said it, beating Woodbury in the conference championship up there was pretty epic, and I'll never forget that game. And beating Eden Prairie up at the state tournament and was awesome too, because two powerhouse teams, and just this fun games, and we found a way to win those ones, and those are pretty cool memories.
Awesome. So you wrap up your high school career. Walk us through the recruiting process. Obviously, you wrestled Division I for wrestling, but maybe walk us through where you get in some looks for football. Walk us through what that looked like.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't pursue football at all. So when I was getting letters, I never returned them. I think I probably could have played football at that time, but I'm pretty short. So I knew that, I knew it wasn't going to get me to the level I wanted to compete at. I think I could have walked on, maybe at the U and some other places if I really wanted to. But at my size, it just didn't make a ton of sense. But I knew I wanted to wrestle in college, and that's where I spent most of my time training. So I got recruited by most of the Big Ten schools, some Ivy League schools, which I did not belong in, and some schools out on the West Coast and Arizona State. But I knew I wanted to be Big Ten. It's kind of like SEC football for those you don't know. SEC football is where all the best football schools are. Obviously, once in a while, I like Big Ten, obviously, but once in a while we sprinkle one of those guys in there. But it's usually SEC football is where the gold standard is. And so for me, I knew wrestling. I wanted my goals to be the Big Ten, because that's where all the best guys are. Outside of Oklahoma State, I mean, all the best guys are in the Big Ten. So I knew I wanted to wrestle here, and then just knowing the coaches from the Gophers as a kid growing up and watching those guys, and being friends with guys on the team already, and like Luke Becker and Jared Lawrence and those guys, just the success that they were having, I knew that's where I wanted to be. I knew we had a chance to win national titles when I was there, and I knew it was a place I could develop. And the coaches, Joe Russell, Marty Morgan, Mark Schwab, and those guys, I've known those guys forever, living in Minnesota. And I trained up at the U a lot of Mondays and Wednesdays, and I seen these guys, and they talked to me, were super awesome, and I knew that's where I wanted to be. I knew where, at the end of the day, I wanted to be a Gopher, and worked out great. And wrestling for them was a dream come true. So I went on some recruiting visits to other schools, and that was it was a good experience and stuff. But even when I was out there, I knew I wanted to go to the U and be with my friends that I had on the team, and the coaches that I knew and trusted, and it's close to home. And as you can see, I'm still in Hastings, so I like being close to home, apparently.
So you maybe walk us through your 5 years at the University of Minnesota, wrestling, what you majored in, and anything else that goes into that.
Yeah. So I went to the U. I lived at Stanford Hall with a lot of the athletes, which was fun. My freshman year, I redshirted, wrestled a bunch of open tournaments. I won a bigger tournament for down at I think it's the UNO Open, Kaufman Open. Won that tournament. I think that's like a 20 under division that year. That was probably my biggest accomplishment that year. Our team won nationals that year though, and that was being up in that room with that level of talent. Holy cow! It's amazing. Like Damian Hahn, who's coaching now at South Dakota State, practicing with him, holy crap, like he's just next level. Owen Elzen, that was an All-American, just a stud. Like when I was wrestling these guys in practice, I wasn't even sniffing a takedown. They were just beating the living lights off of me, and so that was a tough year, kind of being the big dog in high school to go into that was a really tough transition, I'm not going to lie. And having schooling on top of that, and I did okay in high school, but I was not, I didn't understand how much effort it took in college. And I made the dean's list. I think I had 1 A- my freshman year, and I was academic all Big Ten a couple years later and stuff. So I did well in college, but I really had to focus on that. And it took a lot of effort. And I know Jay Robinson said to me, there's 3 things in college and you can be good at 2 of them. And that always stuck with me. And so I'm like, well, what are these 3 things? And he said, there's wrestling, there's social life, and there's school. You can be good at 2 of the 3. You figure it out. So, and it was smart. I mean, he's the true story there. So I chose obviously wrestling in school, and I found success there. And it's obviously sacrificing a lot of the social life. But had been dating my high school sweetheart since my senior year. And she ended up going to the University of Minnesota too. So the social life wasn't as important, I guess. And but our team was so close, and we bonded really well, and we had just a blast. So it's not like we didn't have that too, but is obviously we knew where we needed to train, and we knew when we knew to have fun. So that was outside of the season. But yeah, so then next year I had a chance to start on the team, and that there was just, I was behind multiple All-Americans, and so that year was really, really difficult because I wanted to start and have a shot, and I just couldn't crack the lineup. And that really took a mental toll on a guy, and it was tough. I'm like, God, am I in there doing the right thing? Should I transfer? Should I, what do I need to do here to make this team? It's like, it's impossible. You got all the best guys in the country fighting for these spots. And I decided to stick it out, and I'm glad I did. And that year was the toughest for me. But then after that, I started the next 3 years for the team. Had some ups and downs, and throughout that process, some injuries. But being a 3 starter at the U, and when I was there, the team won 2 national titles, a couple Big Ten titles. Was a great experience. I wasn't on those teams when they won it. I wasn't a part of the 10 guys, but just being in the room supporting those guys and grinding every day, obviously, is a big part of getting those guys ready to go. And they helped develop me too. So my 3rd year in college, I just missed qualifying for NCs, and I just mentally beat myself. I was good enough to do it. I just mentally I didn't make it happen, and that was tough going after that season too. The way that ended it like that, and I should have qualified, and I didn't. So it was my goal the next year to qualify and to get back on track. So my 4th year in college, I qualified for NCs. I upset the number 1 seed in the Big Ten that year, and then in the next match, I'm in the semifinals against a kid that I beat from Iowa earlier in the year. Super strong kid, Paul Bradley, and I hit an inside trip, and he drives into my knee, pops. I fall out of bounds and into a weird scramble, and I'm like, God, what the heck happened there? My knees feels weak, and I had never felt like that before. And it just felt loose and weak, and I didn't trust it. And I ended up, I finished the match, and it was painful. I just didn't know what had happened. And so we taped it up, and I wrestled through the Big Ten tournament like that. I took 5th and qualified for NCs, which was awesome. That was my goal. But my real goal was to be an All-American. So I'm at the NCAA tournament down St. Louis, win my first match, and then I'm wrestling the returning NCAA champ, Greg Jones. And it's down to the final 10 seconds of the match. I have a chance to win. I'm doing a go behind. I clip his ankle. He's got my leg, and I have him completely boosted forward, and I have his ankle hooked. And they don't give me 2. Create a scramble. I try to force something. He ends up taking me down, and I get beat. And pretty much the end of that season. And I had a chance to come back, but I kind of just beat myself up so much that I didn't believe I was gonna do it after that. And I still hangs with me today. I wish I could just let that go and refocus. And it's, I tell the kids that, but it's not that easy sometimes. And I know that from experience. I talk to the kids about how important it is to refocus after you lose and reset, and know that just because you lost that last one and didn't perform well then, you don't take that with you. Don't carry it with you. So I know from experience how that feels. But consequently, I think I rushed through that. But I did end up blowing my ACL out in that match in the Big Tens, and I knew that going into nationals. So I don't know if that fed into it too. Like, I got an owie. So, but it is what it is. So looking back, I know I had opportunities to make it happen, just didn't do it. Now I had surgery before my senior year, right before my senior year of wrestling, or the whole summer I rehabbed it, and then going into my senior year, we find out that we're pregnant with Emma, and that's obviously a life changer. And then I'm coming off a knee surgery, but I finally start to get my head back into where it should be for wrestling. I get I start to trust my knee. I've never been injured before like that big. My knee starts to feel good. I'm starting to wrestle really well. I'm beating All-Americans that have been returning. I'm starting to wrestle really well. And then we make it to national duels, and I think we're in the semis against Illinois. I snap this kid down into a shot, and I wasn't expecting him to drop in on a single. My knee wasn't planted. He blows out my PCL of my other knee, and sadly enough, that's what ended my college career. I couldn't wrestle on that one. That one was, my knee swelled up like a cantaloupe. and it was just too weak to compete on it. So not the best way to end a college career for wrestling, but I knew, having a kid at the time and stuff, I knew that I couldn't let it get me down. I just got to keep focused and just move on. And I think really that's what ending my college career that way. I think that's what really motivated me to be a successful high school coach. And as I reflect on that too, a lot of that is why I came back to Hastings. All the coaches and the teachers and the families in this community that helped me and opened up doors for me, providing me food, bringing me in their vehicles, driving me to tournaments, to practices, and the great coaching that I had. I could list a million great coaches in Hastings that I had coming through here. I wanted to give back to the kids like me that needed that help to make it to that next level. Not being the first of my family to go to college was huge. And without those coaches and teachers and families here in town, it wouldn't have happened for me. I just don't believe it would have. So I'm thankful for that. And that's why I want to serve this community still. And I still do. Coaching 2 sports now, football and wrestling, obviously. I just love to give back to these kids that I'm picking up and bringing to the practices that I'm driving home, that I've given meals to, just like coaches did for me. And that's what it's all about. I want to connect with these kids and help them achieve their goals in life, and no matter what their circumstances are, because everybody's got their own, tough times and adversity. So I'm there to help pick those kids up and find them and get them on the right track.
That's awesome. And that kind of segues into my next question. And you might have just answered it, but it was, why did you get into education and become a teacher? And you might have just answered it. If you want to say anything else about that as well, you can go for it. Why you got into education?
Yeah, I did, but I'll go over it again. I just think it's super important. We're really blessed in this community with amazing teachers and people that actually care about you, not just a number. They want to connect, they care, and they want to see you grow. And you don't get that everywhere. I mean, I really don't believe that. And I think that's why we have so many alumni coming back to give back to this town, just like I have. For wrestling, as you know, we do all the time. And one of my favorite events of the year is Gobblegate, and they raise money for Thanksgiving. That run, they raise money for the food shelf in town. Well, as a kid, I went to that food shelf all the time. My family needed food there, and so now, and I say that sort of these kids, and then we invite them to run with us at the event. Even though you walk, I run, but that's like Vite started that tradition, and I carried it forward, and now we get alumni coming back for that run that we haven't seen in years come back and run with us, and we have a huge group, and our whole team comes down and runs it, and they know why I run it, and they run it for their own reasons, but it's a pretty amazing experience. But the connections I've had with these teachers in town, coaches, that kept me on the right path, and I didn't want to let them down, and I didn't want to let myself down. And some of these teachers I saw, even in school, that saw more in me than I was willing to give sometimes, but they saw more in me that I had, and they believed, and it made me believe, like, man, what are these guys thinking of? Like, I can't do that. And yeah, you can. And watching that growth and stuff in myself, and now seeing in other kids that are coming through, it's what I do it for. It's to see these kids become productive citizens, out in the world, not just in Hastings, but wherever they go. And how much time we spend with them year round, you make tight connections with these kids, and up until last year, every summer, I mean, I think I had a barbecue at my house once a week in the summer to feed the kids right at my house. And, to share meals with these kids, some of them that need it, they need that meal. And I know that. And, doing things like that, open up my house to these kids in the summer where I can feed them, they can swim and have fun. And outside of actual sports, just deepens that connection. And that's why doing these summer camps where we're with these kids for hours a day all summer, keeping them engaged, keeping them having fun, keeping them fed, keeping them safe, making those real life connections is, I think, why we are successful at Hastings Wrestling, because we are willing to do those things and make those deep connections, not just in the school day, not just after school, but after, in the summer, in life. That's why we have so many alumni coming back, giving back to our program, I believe.
So walk us through the last 15 years. jobs that you've had. You graduated high school in 2000 and probably college around 2005. Family, getting married, kids, things like that.
Yep. So I had Emma my senior year. She just turned 16, so time flies. And me and Cassia got married that summer after my high school sweetheart. She's been with me the whole way, and I've been blessed with how lucky I am by having her in my life. Outside of the coaches and stuff like that, and she's really made me who I am. And so I've been lucky in that fashion that she's from town too. This made it easy. But so we have three daughters now. I have she's my oldest is Emma. I have a sixth grader, Addie, who's my oldest one's in show choir and theater, and that's her passion. And she played some sports growing up too. She soccer and swimming, but she no longer does that. She would be a thrower in track, I think, this year. But she's an amazing singer. And I got a sixth grade daughter, Addison, who's an absolute stud hockey player, and she likes soccer, is super good at soccer too. But she's her athleticism and her work ethic. I don't know where she got it from, but probably her mom maybe. But then my youngest daughter is in first grade, Madden. And so I got three girls, and I thought I was going to have a whole team of wrestlers coming through, but didn't work out that way. But Madden's also a hockey and soccer player, and she loves that stuff. We got her quite invested, and she's looking up to her big sister, seeing what she's doing. We out of college, we end up having to move in with Cassia's dad for a while because we had a kid. I hadn't had a teaching job yet. We weren't making any money. Cassia ended up graduating college in 3.5 years because of having a kid. So she worked real hard to get to that point too. She got a job right away. I ended up got really, really lucky with my first job. I went to Woodbury Junior High. I just started my application online, and I get a phone call like that night. I hadn't even finished it. And the guy named Dennis Roos calls me up and says, "Hey, McLay, you looking for a job?" I go, "Yeah." He's like, "You got it." I'm like, "I didn't even finish my application." He just happened to know me from wrestling, and that opened up a door. I just got really, really lucky. The guy that had that job was going to fight overseas. And so I got that job, and I was able to coach in Hastings still. That was right out of college, and which was a blessing. The next year, I was still up in limbo, but the coaching job at Woodbury High School opened, and so I was going to have to leave Hastings to coach there, which was tough. But to get the teaching job, I had to obviously coach there. So I got a teaching job at the high school, and I coached there, coached football. It made me grow as a teacher and as a person, because I didn't have the comfort zone of the community that I knew and was aware of. But I tell you, it was a great experience. Great people up there. Some of those kids that I coached on that team, actually, one of them married Mike Harp's daughter. One of my favorite kids, Mike Willett, from up there, just a stud. So I coached him there. And then he ends up marrying one of my colleagues' daughters. Pretty cool deal. But then I went to Egan the next year because of jobs, and was the head coach there, coached football there, taught there at the high school. And then a job opened up in Hastings. Steph Buclair, former one of my good buddies, his mom, retired, and got a phone call, said, "Hey, we think you should apply." Applied for the job in town. Long time ago now, and been here ever since. So ever since then, I started coaching football again, obviously right away. I coached with Pete McGinnis, who used to be my coach, and just been having a blast coaching with him. Some varsity stuff, but mostly 10th grade for football. And then between head and assistant coach, a little back and forth, obviously there too with wrestling. It's just been awesome. I did coach 1 year of middle school track here. That was like herding cats, but it was fun. I've been blessed with great athletes and students here at Hastings, and it's been an absolute joy being able to give back to these kids here. But yeah, that kind of in a nutshell is my post college life, I guess.
Did you coach middle school track with D-Wall at all or no?
No,
Oh,
he
shoot.
wasn't.
Okay. Because this would have been my third podcast in a row with the D-Wall story. So I was just hoping for another D-Wall story, but okay, never mind. We'll move on then. All right. Always trying to look for those. All right. So you've been coaching for about 15 years now. What do you think one of your most memorable moments is that isn't competition related?
I don't know if it's a specific moment. I know the one that's sticking out in my head right now, I can't really share a ton of details, but I think it has to do with being there for kids when they're going through the worst time. And I had a kid that had some mental health issues, and I was there for them. I was lucky. I was fortunate enough that he reached out, and I was there for him when he really needed me. And God, I want to get emotional thinking about it, but he was in a bad spot, and I was able to help him in that spot, move through it. And like me, he was the first in his family to make it to college. And now he's in college doing phenomenal. But I tell you that night when he was going through that, I didn't know how to handle it, but I was there for him. And I just feel blessed that I was able to help him out and be in that position to do that. Because of the relationship I had built with him prior to that moment. You know, and we lost another kid to suicide is probably the worst moment in my coaching career. And I'll never forget it. And you know, it's one of those toughest. That's one thing they don't you don't think about when you're going into coaching and teaching are the tough moments. Obviously, you think about the state titles and all the fun stuff, you know, and but it's important that to build those connections with those kids for outside of wrestling and football and sports, because that's life. And you know, building those connections with kids just means the world. And watching them succeed and become good people, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, no, I agree with. I mean, sports lasts for some kids 6 years in kind of middle school and high school, and 4 for a lot, and maybe a little shorter for others. So it's really those connections that kind of last a lifetime, you know, and having that maybe that title of athlete kind of taken away from you sometimes is really hard. So it's got to be that relationship's got to be more than just with the sport. So I know what you're saying. All right, last question here for you, then, Coach. Kind of same question. Your favorite moment, sports related moment that is competition related, then.
Gotcha. You know, it's you know, there's been a few times where we needed a pin to send us to the state tournament as a team, and finding ways to make that happen, man, is just the best. I think of Cullen Brendelin when we were down in Section 1 wrestling against Owatonna. If he didn't pin his kid, we weren't going to state, and he found a way to pin to win. And then you think about last year with Brady Schiller, one of the best moments ever. Just a hardworking kid that didn't get a bunch of varsity experience until his senior year, and then he does it for the team to pin to win to send our team to state. It's hard to replicate those type of moments because the team's involved. Those are amazing. You know, but obviously the state championship, Zach Rohr, he had a concussion late in the season, can't wrestle for weeks, loses to a kid in the section finals, has the same kid in the state finals, and finds a way to beat him. That man, you can't beat those moments. You know, Trey Rogers winning state, a little less drama with that one. We kind of knew he was gonna, but no less still awesome moments. You know, Jake Johnson, I think, is one of the best stories I can think of too. You know, this kid had wrestled JV pretty much his whole life. He put his time in though. Great student, great kid, great partner, but just really never hit that level where he was wrestling varsity. Our team was tough. So I don't know how much experience he got up until his senior year. He was JV pretty much up until that year. He probably had some his junior year, but senior year ends up being, he just figures it out, and he's an absolute animal his senior year. Then we get to sections. His section, the best 2 kids in the state, some of the best kids in the state were in his weight. So he had 2 returning all-state kids at his weight class. He beats them both to go to the state tournament that year. And then he goes on and wrestles in college because he fought through that adversity, and it was resilient and just kept going. And that type of kid is awesome. You know, obviously we love coaching the absolute studs. You know, those are easy, you know. But when you have a kid like that didn't see the limelight until his senior year and had we didn't think he was going to wrestle in college. But then after senior year, he's like, man, I can wrestle in college. I'm like, yeah, you can. You just beat some of the best kids in the state, pal. And he goes off and has a great college career. I mean, that's so cool, you know, and those are stuff that you hang your hat on. And, you know, but there's a lot of sad moments in there too, where kids that shoulda, woulda, coulda made it happen. I think about one of my favorite kids I've ever coached. I have a lot of them. Eric Bauer, just an absolute animal coming through. He's wrestling Mitch Bankston in the state finals, and he loses in ultimate overtime with .9 on the clock. The kid gets an escape. I mean, it was crazy. And that kid goes on to win 5 state titles. But man, that could have been him. He had him beat. You know, he was good enough to do it. I don't know what, like, he did everything right in that match. And he was literally a second short of being a state champion. That haunts me, but he's a great kid and he's doing great things. And he didn't let him hold him back. But like, you think about stuff like that too, how close some of those moments were. So.
No, that's awesome. So that's all the questions I got for you, Coach McLay. Anything else? The floor is yours. Anything else you want to talk about? It's something I didn't ask you that you want to talk about. The floor is yours to go for it.
I think we covered pretty much everything, man. But I appreciate the opportunity, and I think this is awesome for people to to give back and to this community, because this is a great place to be. We got awesome families here, and that truly care about developing these young people here. So I just like to be a part of that process, and we got a lot of coaches just like me and you that in our high school that love helping people out. So that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Thank you.